In 1949, a builder in Everett, Washington, stuffed hundreds of crumpled newspapers behind the drywall of a modest family home. Almost 70 years later, a homeowner named Keith Moser opened that wall expecting insulation and found headlines from the Truman administration still doing the job. He wasn't looking at junk. He was looking at a heating system that had quietly worked for 7 decades without a single repair or a single dollar spent. And at a method contractors stopped mentioning around the time insulation became an industry. Our grandparents knew this trick well. Before fiberglass rolled off factory lines after the war, families across America insulated with whatever the day delivered, and most days that meant the newspaper. Yesterday's headlines pressed into walls, attics, and floors. Up in the mountains of Appalachia, folks pasted newspaper and catalogue pages directly onto their walls as wallpaper. It sealed the cracks between boards and blocked the wind, holding in heat through winters that would test any modern furnace. Store-bought insulation simply didn't exist for most working families, and even when it did, the price put it out of reach. The paper that arrived on the porch every morning, though, that was free, endless, and already in the house. A Minneapolis roofing crew tearing into an old attic a few years back found newspapers that had sat there for 80 years. The pages were brittle and yellow, but the house they'd protected was still standing and still warm. One Virginia homeowner opened his walls and discovered the original builders had packed every cavity with leaves and newspaper. He'd assumed the house had no insulation at all. In fact, it had been insulated since the day it was framed. Then came the measurement. Years later, when curious homeowners actually tested that old crumpled newsprint, the figure came back at roughly R3.5 per inch, and if that number means nothing to you yet, hold on to it, because it's about to mean a great deal. Ra value is how the building trade scores resistance to heat flow. The higher the number, the slower warmth escapes your house. Modern building codes are written around it, and your heating bill rises or falls with it. A standard fiberglass bat, the pink stuff sold in every home center in the country, delivers somewhere between R3.1 and R3.7 per inch. Read that against the newspaper's 3.5, and the comparison gets uncomfortable for an entire industry. Inch for inch, the free paper our grandparents wadded into their walls performs in the same range as the product we've been buying for 70 years. Nobody advertised that, and there's a reason nobody did. To understand why, you have to understand why paper insulates in the first place, because the secret was never really the paper itself. Newsprint is wood fiber, and what those tangled fibers do better than almost anything is trap air. Still air is one of the poorest conductors of heat in nature. Every insulation product on the market, from fiberglass to foam, is really just a different way of holding millions of tiny air pockets perfectly still inside your walls. Crumpled newspaper does exactly that. Each wadded sheet creates dead air space, and layered together the sheets form a thick blanket of trapped, motionless air between you and the winter. The same physics achieved at the cost of nothing. The old-timers added a second benefit without naming it. Paper pressed against board walls sealed the gaps where wind drove cold straight into the house, and draft stopping, as any energy auditor will tell you today, matters as much as our value itself. Installation made the difference then and now. When Keith Moser examined those 1949 newspapers in Everett, what struck him was how carefully they'd been placed, packed tight, layered deliberately, fitted into every corner. The Department of Energy still says the same thing. Insulation performance depends on proper installation. A sloppy fiberglass job with gaps and compression can underperform a careful newspaper job from the Hoover years. The material gets the credit, but the hands doing the work always mattered more, and our grandparents had patient hands. Now, the objection you're already thinking of: fire. Yes, dry newsprint burns, and packing untreated paper into a wall cavity carries a real risk that nobody should wave away. The old method had a genuine flaw, and it deserves saying plainly. What's strange is how that flaw was solved quietly decades ago. Treat shredded paper with borate, a simple mineral salt, and it resists flame, mold, and insects, all at once. The fix was cheap, the silence around it was not. Because once you solve the fire problem, you're left with an awkward fact. Ground-up newspaper, treated with borate, is one of the best insulation materials ever put inside an American wall. The industry knows this. They sell it themselves under a name that doesn't mention newspapers. Walk into any insulation supplier today and ask about cellulose. You'll hear about a modern, eco-friendly product blown into attics across the country. And what you're buying at a healthy markup is shredded newsprint, ground fine and dusted with that same borate treatment. One New York writer told the story of spending $3,500 to insulate her drafty old house. The crew arrived, drilled holes, and blew the walls full of shredded newspaper. $3,500 for the material her great-grandmother got free on the doorstep. She wasn't cheated exactly. Dense pack cellulose is an excellent product, professionally installed, and her heating bills surely thanked her. The point cuts differently. The method never stopped working. It just stopped being free and started being branded. Follow the timeline, and the shift makes sense. Fiberglass arrived with the post-war building boom, carrying factory backing and national advertising budgets, and a product you manufacture beats a product people can make themselves every time. In every market, a contractor can't invoice you for yesterday's paper. He can invoice for pink rolls with a brand name, and the whole supply chain earns its margin along the way. None of that is a conspiracy. All of it shapes what you're told. There were honest reasons too, and they deserve their place. Fiberglass doesn't burn, and it doesn't feed mold when water finds it. Loose paper in a damp wall can slump and rot, quietly ceasing to work. Old houses have shown all of this. Moisture was always the old method's other enemy. A roof leak that fiberglass shrugs off will turn packed newsprint into a soggy mat, and a wet wall is worse than an empty one. The grandparents who used paper also kept their roofs tight. So the honest verdict isn't that newspaper was perfect, it's that it was dismissed rather than improved for the homeowner's benefit. The improvement happened anyway, behind the scenes, and came back to market wearing a new name and a new price tag. That Virginia homeowner, a writer named Waldo Jackwith, went on to point out something modern energy talk rarely touches. Paper insulation takes a stunningly small amount of energy to produce compared with fiberglass. His drafty old walls were, in one sense, greener than anything on the market. Fiberglass is born in a furnace, melting glass at extreme temperatures before spinning it into wool. Cellulose is born in a shredder. One of these consumes enormous energy to make a product that saves energy. The other barely consumes any at all. Our grandparents stumbled into what engineers now call embodied energy, and they beat the modern industry at it without trying. Their insulation had already lived one life as the morning news before starting its second life inside the wall. That habit of second lives ran through everything they built. Flour sacks became dresses and ash became soap, while the newspaper made other stops too, under rugs, inside winter coats, because trapped air works the same everywhere. Measure their houses by our standards, and the old walls fall short. An inch of paper is no match for a code-mandated attic stacked deep with modern insulation. Measure by dollars spent against warmth gained, though, and those Depression-era walls may never have been beaten. What got lost between their generation and ours wasn't a material. It was the assumption underneath it that keeping a house warm was a problem you could think through yourself, with what you had, before anyone sold you the answer. Keith Moser, standing in front of his opened wall in Everett, could have called the whole thing junk and ordered modern bats. What he actually felt, reading 1950 headlines pulled from behind his drywall, was closer to respect. The builders who packed that wall left no warranty and no invoice, yet their work outlasted most roofs and every insulation warranty ever printed. 70 Pacific Northwest winters is a test no laboratory can run, and the newspapers passed it. If you live in a house built before the 1950s, there's a fair chance some of this history sits inside your own walls right now. Find out what it is before you pay someone to rip it out. It may still be quietly earning its keep. Should you stuff your walls with newsprint this weekend? No, untreated paper in a modern wall invites the fire and moisture problems the old-timers managed, and you likely won't. The lesson isn't the recipe. Cellulose already perfected the recipe. The lesson is the question your grandparents asked before every purchase: what do I already have that can do this job? Asked honestly, that question still cuts household bills deeper than any coupon, which may be exactly why nobody in the business of selling teaches it. Tomorrow morning, somewhere, a newspaper will land on a porch, get read once, and be thrown away. The same object that once kept entire families warm through January. The knowledge didn't burn and it didn't rot. It just got buried, one renovation at a time.